In 587 BC, the Babylonian Empire breached the walls of Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, and forced the population of Judah into exile. To understand the spiritual decay that preceded this physical collapse, we examine the 65th chapter of Isaiah. This text explains the internal rot responsible for the external destruction. These verses detail a sharp tension between unmerited grace given to outsiders and a strict judgment brought upon a rebellious covenant people. Analyzing this specific prophetic text allows us to deconstruct the exact mechanics of divine covenant revocation in ancient Israel. We begin the study with Isaiah chapter 65, verse 1. I am sought of them that asked not for me. I am found of them that sought me not. I said, behold me, unto a nation that was not called by my name. The immediate theological implication is a God actively revealing himself to a demographic that had never sought him, nor had they historically been called by his name. This demographic identifies as the Gentile nations. The verse highlights an unprecedented opening of the divine invitation to those outside the lineage of Abraham. The Apostle Paul later provides a New Testament context for this verse in Romans chapter 10, verses 19 through 21. Paul connects Isaiah's prophecy to the 1st century AD preaching of the gospel, where the message was taken directly to Gentile nations who had no prior profession of faith in Jehovah. Verse 1 clarifies that divine relationship is no longer bound by Abrahamic lineage, but by responsiveness to God's manifestation. The focus now shifts from the calling of the Gentiles to the behavior of the established covenant people. This behavior is introduced in Isaiah chapter 65, verse 2. I have spread out my hands all the day unto a rebellious people, which walketh in a way that was not good, after their own thoughts. The imagery depicts God continually offering guidance, while the people persist in stubborn rebellion, relying entirely on their own flawed logic. The specific nature of this rebellion is listed in Isaiah chapter 65, verse 3. A people that provoketh me to anger continually to my face, that sacrificeth in gardens and burneth incense upon altars of brick. The first acts of provocation involve engaging in pagan rituals and sacrifices within sacred groves or gardens, imitating the religions of their neighbors. The mention of burning incense upon altars of brick points to a reliance on man-made, unauthorized religious practices. Under Mosaic law, altars were strictly regulated. Using brick instead of unhewn stone was a calculated violation of God's commanded structures. These acts represented a calculated, face-to-face rejection of established covenant law in favor of neighboring pagan customs. The record of sin intensifies in Isaiah chapter 65, verse 4, which remain among the graves and lodge in the monuments, which eat swine's flesh, and broth of abominable things is in their vessels. The text indicates the practice of necromancy, the act of remaining among graves and lodging in monuments to seek supernatural visions from the dead. The verse further details dietary rebellion. By consuming forbidden swine's flesh and abominable broth, the people rendered themselves ritually impure and physically defiant of God's law. We find the historical context for these temple abominations in the writings of a contemporary prophet, in Ezekiel chapter 8, verse 14. Then he brought me to the door of the gate of the Lord's house, which was toward the north, and behold, there sat women weeping for Tammuz. Tammuz was a Mesopotamian fertility deity associated with seasonal cycles of death and rebirth. His worship required specific ritual mourning rites that mirrored the Babylonian dry season. This was an act of severe apostasy. These mourning rites for a pagan deity were performed within the sacred precincts of the Jerusalem temple itself. The integration of Tammuz worship proves Israel had completely synthesized their theology with foreign idolatry, resulting in a state of spiritual adultery. This external rebellion was fueled by the internal state described in Isaiah chapter 65, verse 5, which say, Stand by thyself, come not near to me, for I am holier than thou. These are a smoke in my nose, a fire that burneth all the day. The phrase, stand by thyself, for I am holier than thou, demonstrates a deep-seated spiritual pride. They viewed themselves as superior, even while violating the core of the law. This arrogance opposes God's sovereignty. It replaces submission to his will with a trust in one's own wisdom, creating hypocritical divisions within the community. God compares this self-righteousness to smoke in the nose. It is a metaphor for a continuous, irritating offense that remains in the presence of God throughout the day. This pride hindered any capacity for repentance, effectively sealing the spiritual fate of the nation. The accumulation of these sins leads to a formal divine verdict. This verdict is stated in Isaiah chapter 65, verse 6. "Behold, it is written before me, I will not keep silence, but will recompense, even recompense into their bosom." "Behold, it is written before me" signifies a meticulous, permanent record. God declares that he will no longer remain silent while these documented acts persist. The text introduces a cultural metaphor of measuring recompense into their bosom. Ancient Oriental garments featured a large, loose front fold that served as a carrying pocket for goods or grain. This garment metaphor connects to the theology of judgment. God will fill their pockets with the exact measure of his wrath. The coming judgment was a carefully measured consequence, scaled to the weight of their documented historical offenses. The spiritual rebellion detailed in Isaiah 65 provides the causal link for the physical destruction of Judah in 587 BC. As Israel faced catastrophic recompense for covenant breaking, the door was simultaneously opened to the unmerited grace now offered to the Gentiles. This concludes our overview.